Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, I walked out of Beaver Stadium on Saturday afternoon thinking Ohio State is going to lose to Michigan this year. That is pretty much a certainty. And then I watched Michigan and Michigan State play, and Tony, now I'm not so sure.
Tom, let's get ready to harp on Michigan's offense. Watching the Ohio State Penn State game, like the first half, I'm thinking, well, I can see Michigan having some success here and there, and then the running game, that'll be difficult. But Penn State was running the ball kind of well, and then you assume that Michigan will run it better, and the Ohio State offense is not really able to do anything running the ball, and so one-dimensional offense does not look so promising for Ohio State. And then you see what Michigan does against Michigan State, which isn't all that unusual from what they did the week before, and I'm specifically talking about the red zone issues. And I don't know if you want to get right into the red zone problems, or if we want to let's talk about the Michigan offense first, and just give some numbers out here. So Michigan rushes for 276 yards. Fantastic. Blake Corum, again, tremendous. 177 yards rushing on 33 attempts. Again, that's a lot, but he's had a week off. He had 4 straight games of like 120 touches total. So you give him a week off, then you get him right back to it. The thing that I like about this is, and that is also maybe a concern, Tom, is that he does rush for 177 yards. The longest rush is 17. Like, he is earning every single yard that he gets, and is, again, we've been saying all year, he's fantastic. He's playing extremely well, and he's earning everything he gets, and that means he's paying for it as well. And that concerns me, but he hasn't shown any signs of, look at Ohio State's running backs who are splitting carries and are dinged up every single week, and they've already lost one for the year. This guy just keeps churning.
Yeah, it has been really impressive. And you do wonder, at some point, you have to hit a wall. I mean, you can, and maybe that's the old Alabama running backs where they hit the wall right after Nick Saban has taken all the tread off their tires and right before they get to the NFL, and then a bunch of them don't pan out. You wonder, at some point you have to run out of gas. I mean, that's just how it is. And that's setting aside, sometimes you'll just twist your ankle. You can twist your ankle on the first play of your first carry of the season. So setting that aside, just the grind of the season, you wonder how beat up he's going to be, because Ohio State has their 3 last games going into Michigan. They can kind of let guys get healthy. I'm not 100% sure I don't think you're going to see Mayan Williams this weekend. I'm not 100% sure you're going to see Travion Henderson this weekend, because it's Northwestern, and you can beat Northwestern with Dallin Hayden. So, and Chip Trainum. That I don't think is going to be a big issue. Michigan, the week before the Ohio State game, has Illinois, and Illinois is not a gimme this year. That was not one you looked at before the season and went, oh boy, that could be a tricky home finale, senior day, yada yada, right before the Ohio State game. That could be a pretty tough physical game, and if you need to run Corum 25 times against Illinois, then he's coming into Ohio State maybe a little bumped up and bruised, and this is not an Ohio State defense that is a Kerry Combs / Matt Barnes joint. This is a very different Ohio State defense. Those yards are going to be a little tougher this year. So, yeah, I do think Corum has held up incredibly well. At some point, maybe he makes it through the whole season, and you play a couple postseason games and all that, and he makes it through that. That's fine. At some point, it adds up. At some point, time is undefeated. Tackles are undefeated after a certain point. I don't know. The Ohio State game might be soon enough that it does not catch up to him before then.
But this is a program that now has higher goals than just beating Ohio State, and I wonder if this kind of attack will allow Blake Corum to be at his best when it's Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee or something like that. You look in the Big Ten play time, just in Big Ten play, Blake Corum carrying the ball 29 times a game over 5 games. He is second in attempts to Chase Brown at Illinois, who is carrying the ball 33 times a game. in Big Ten play because Brett Bielema don't care. He's going to run Chase Brown all the way to, I don't know, a bowl game against Tennessee. I don't know how it's going to shake out.
I was going to say USC. They might be in the Rose Bowl before all is said and done, depending on how this all shakes out. But I mean, this is a whole separate conversation, and we probably need to save this for a different episode. But you look at that Michigan offense, and I know Michigan has bigger goals than beating Ohio State and winning the Big Ten this year. How would you handicap a Michigan-Tennessee game right now? How is Michigan hanging with Tennessee? That seems like Michigan's offense right now is going to get them to a certain point. It's possible that point includes a win over Ohio State. But if you're playing a defense that can just sling the ball all over the field and you're doing it on a neutral site, fast, dry track, Ohio State on a fast, dry track, I think clobbers Michigan this year. It's not going to be a fast, dry track necessarily in Columbus. I don't think Michigan is going to fare real well when you get to the Tennessee type teams on a fast, dry track, because Tennessee's going to be splitting up sevens. And Tennessee's run defense is real good. Like, I think Tennessee, Michigan might be more lopsided than Georgia, Michigan was last year. How's that for a hot take?
That's pretty good, Tom. And we can't spend any time on that because we have to talk about something else. But you see what Keon Coleman did, Michigan State receiver. I'm wondering, what can Jalen Hyatt do? And what can Marvin Harrison do? I think when you look at what the Tennessee offense does, Ohio State can still do that same stuff. But one, the conditions have to allow for it, and so does Ryan Day. And when you are the head coach in a rivalry game, you can't necessarily let it. They don't necessarily let it as loose as like Josh Heupel would in a one-off playoff game against. I don't care who Michigan is. I don't care. It could be the same as playing TCU. Like Ohio State playing TCU would probably do things differently than Ohio State playing Michigan because it's Ohio State versus Michigan, and it's so important, and every point counts. Like you're never going to get this moment back. Whereas if you're playing a TCU or a Tennessee or somebody else, you're like, there will be other possessions. There will be other plays. And when you play your rival, it's like, this is the most important play that has ever happened. We cannot screw this up. We need to maximize this. There will be nothing else after this. And so it is different. And you can have very similar offenses in Tennessee and Ohio State, but they operate against Michigan very differently.
Well, and I want to be real clear. I'm picking Tennessee because I think Tennessee is a uniquely bad matchup for Michigan. Michigan against Alabama, I mean, that's probably a closer game. Michigan against Georgia is probably a closer game. Michigan against Georgia is certainly a closer game than it was last year. I just think Tennessee is a uniquely bad matchup for Michigan, where that's one of those be careful what you wish for. If they're 11-1 and they're you're lobbying to get into playoff as the 4 seed, like that might be a real sad New Year's Eve if that's how that shakes out. But there's a long way to go between now and then. And like I said, I have a lot less. I feel like I'm less sure about what I think is going to happen in the Ohio State Michigan game now than I was before watching these two teams play last week.
Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be, Tom. I don't know why you're complaining. This is just relax. JJ McCarthy, 50 yards rushing on 7 carries. Yeah, I think it was, he was technically sacked once, but they didn't actually call it a sack. I guess they called it a run. But, overall, like, I really like his ability to run, and it's an added weapon to this Michigan offense, as we keep saying every week. But 15 of 25 passing, 167 yards. I think he might still lead the nation in completion percentage, which you should when you don't really throw the ball down the field all that much. And again, I've gone and charted, the same thing I do every week is how far down the field does he throw the ball? And it's not all that far. And then I was also charting the usual, what do they do with their tendencies? And they were breaking tendencies in the first half. In the second half, because I forgot to do it as I was watching it. And by the end of the game, I was like, oh no, I got to go back and watch the offense all over again. Because like in the fourth quarter, in the third and fourth quarter, I'm watching it saying, well, this is going to be a run, this is going to be a pass, and can pretty much nail it. In the first half, I went back and started to chart it, and it's like, well, they're breaking tendencies quite a bit here, enough to where you can't just assume that a pistol is a run and lining up in a shotgun with the running back even to you as a pass. So good job there. I think they did it enough in the first half to where you can just do your normal thing in the second half, especially in this game. What did you think of JJ McCarthy in this one? He was pretty careful with the ball. I don't remember any of those like, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that one.
He threw one that was down the field to Ronnie Bell, maybe, that was it was like they were Spartan defenders. There might have been two Michigan State defenders there. Other than that, they were pretty careful. And I think he completed, I mean, you were the one who charted it, but I'm remembering two kind of downfield to Luke Schoonmaker, one on a cross where he was kind of wide open, one where he just kind of found an open spot in the zone, and they had the one long one to, was that also to Ronnie Bell? No, it was Cornelius Johnson, I think, down the middle of the field. It was Ronnie Bell. Sorry, it was Ronnie Bell. That feels like something that Michigan is going to have to do against a better opponent. Like, you're going to have to throw the ball down the field more. And that's I think one of the things that's a little bit of a concern to me about Michigan is if you're going to lean just on the run and the short pass, you're going to have to, when teams start sucking up to really stop that and, bring the safeties up in the box, you're going to have to be able to throw the ball over people's heads and complete them against better opposition. And I know McCarthy has the arm, but the fact that they're not doing it very much makes me wonder if they trust him to do it. And, there is going to come a time where you're going to, whether you trust him or not, you're going to have to do that because running the ball against a Georgia front or a Tennessee front is going to be difficult. And, we'll see how it goes against the Ohio State front this year, because this is a much, much better Ohio State run defense than it was last year. And, the Buckeyes were not as good against the run against Penn State as I thought they would be, which is one of the reasons I walked out of that stadium going, oh boy, that might not go well for Ohio State. And, but then you look at Michigan in short yardage against Michigan State, and it was kind of like, sometimes they did it, sometimes they didn't. But I mean, a lot of the red zone issues were they can't run it when you're in the red zone and deep passing is not an option. So if deep passing is not really, if they can't demonstrate that deep passing is an option against better opponents, well, that seems like you're going to be living life in the red zone in some ways.
Life in the red zone, not where Michigan wants to be. And a lot of that, I think, is because of trust in J.J. McCarthy. Just looking at the chart here, he threw 9 passes, more than 10 or more yards down the field. He completed 3 of them. And he completed 2 like back-to-back. There was a pass interference on another one, so that that doesn't count. But 3 of 9 on passes, 10 yards downfield is not great. And he threw 25 passes. So, hey, that's actually quite a few in terms of his percentage of downfield passes. So they're getting that up, but the completion percentage isn't coming up. Let's talk about this red zone thing again, or for the rest of the show probably, until we get to the Michigan defense. Michigan in the red zone in this one, they were sorry, I should have had this up. I've got other numbers. They were 2 of 5 in touchdowns. So they're in the red zone 5 times. They scored 2 touchdowns. Definitely not good enough. They have run into issues the past couple of weeks, and really the bulk of the Big Ten play. They've been in the red zone 24 times in the Big Ten. They've scored touchdowns 12 times. 50% is not good. Michigan State came into this game as one of the worst teams in the Big Ten in red zone defense, and Michigan wasn't able to put the ball in the end zone. I think Ohio State was 4-4 maybe, and the game that Michigan State played before that, they're like 3 of 3. So like teams have been putting the ball into the end zone from the red zone. Looking over time, and I realize numbers are going to be averages and numbers are going to be smaller in the red zone because there's fewer possibilities, and sometimes a 1-yard run from the 1 is all you can get. In fact, all the time. But when I went through the last 2 games against Michigan State and Indiana, Michigan is averaging 2.4 yards per carry in the red zone, which, again, it's going to be lower than your normal average, but 2.4 is not a lot. Averaging 1 yard per pass.
Is that a lot? That doesn't seem like a lot.
It is not. That's 8 pass attempts, 8 yards. And as I said earlier, like one of those that is not in that number was a 4 or 5 yard loss for a sack that gets counted as a run. And so if you add that into it, you drop back 9 times and you pick up about 5 total yards over the past 2 games when you try to pass the ball.
Yeah, and, I don't know how much of that, again, is... Are they telling him to be conservative with the ball? Are they telling McCarthy not to force it into tight windows? Because, I think one of the notes I have down here is that this game is just kind of a Rorschach test, and really the Ohio State game is too, the Ohio State-Penn State game, where you can see whatever you want to see here. My question, in a lot of ways, is, okay, Jim Harbaugh's kicking a lot of field goals against Michigan State. How much of that is based on him knowing that Michigan State is not going to be able to score on this defense very much? You can kick field goals against Michigan State because you're going to hold Michigan State to 7 points, and okay, if Keon Coleman gets another one, okay, they get to 14. But they were not like seriously threatening a lot in that game. And, Mel Tucker managed the game kind of differently than Harbaugh did. Harbaugh was, seemed okay with playing for field goals. Tucker passed up a field goal on 4th and 1, which, that call was fine, but the play call itself was not great. Not what you were looking for there. I don't think Harbaugh, and I promise this is going to circle back to JJ McCarthy in a minute. I think Harbaugh, when he's playing a team like Ohio State, which he knows is not going to be able to score, they're going to be able to score more than 7 points. They're going to be able to score more than 20 points. You're probably going to get into the, even last year, which was kind of a disaster for Ohio State, they got to 27. So you're going to have to score touchdowns to beat Ohio State. So if you're going to have to score touchdowns to beat Ohio State, well, you're changing your play calling the whole way, and maybe you're asking JJ McCarthy, you're trusting JJ McCarthy to throw it into tighter windows and take more chances. But you're also calling plays differently down there. If you know you're going to be going for it on 4th and 2 as opposed to, kicking field goals on 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 or whatever it was when they were down there. So I think JJ McCarthy is someone who simultaneously raises the ceiling for the Michigan offense, but also could be something of a limiting factor for the Michigan offense. Because if they don't trust him, or if he just can't make those throws, then that's going to be a problem, because they are going to need him to make plays, either with his legs or his arm, and almost certainly with his arm at some point. Because you can pick up first downs running the ball, but you saw they ran him a lot in the red zone, and it kind of went nowhere pretty much all the time, because you've got so many guys right there. It's not, you don't have the wide open spaces where you've got receivers running 30 yards downfield and opening up they ran one where he was in the backfield long enough that it was like, was this a called quarterback draw, or did you just see the Red Sea part in front of him? And I really honestly wasn't 100% sure. That doesn't happen in the red zone. You've got too many guys in too compact a spot, so he is ultimately going to have to throw the ball better and have to find a way to hit some of those passes in the red zone, or it's not going to happen for him this year.
I think some of the design is maybe an issue, and this came up on the first red zone trip. They had a 3rd and 8, so they run basically 3 curls, and a tight end goes into flats, and the running back goes into the other flats. But the curls, and this is from the 8-yard line, so it's 3rd and goal from the 8. The 3 receivers run curls. 2 of them are 3 or 4 yards downfield, and then the other is like 2 yards deep. And so Michigan State drops like 7 guys back, and they're just sitting in zones. And you're not giving JJ McCarthy an opportunity. He has to throw it through like 3 or 4 defenders to the one guy in the end zone. Why not? And mind you, Tom, what is the square footage of an end zone? Like 300, or it's what, 500 square yards, if we do it that way. So 1,500 square feet or whatever. You're using 1 square yard of the entire end zone by that receiver just running a curl and standing there. Give me the ball. Like you could triple that just by having 3 receivers run curls and just stop. Or, use the entire end zone. And I don't know how confident they are in him, because I'm picturing like other offenses, Ohio State's offenses, where you've got guys running along the back line. You've got mesh routes going on in the end zone. You got pick plays. And here it's just 3 guys go out and turn around and wait for the ball. And 2 of them are going to be tackled at like the 2-yard line, because it's a tough ask to turn around and get into the end zone when everybody is running your way. So I don't know how much opportunity they gave him in this game. He threw 2 touchdowns in the red zone against Indiana. Technically threw a touchdown in this one against Michigan State with the little jet sweep to Blake Corum. So we should go easy on him, even though that one wasn't exactly downfield, as it was what it was. But I think just that play is one reason why it looks like a concerned more than conservative. It just looks like a concerned play. Like, we don't want to give him too much because clearly they are afraid of that.
Right. You don't want to. We have seen him take chances in the end zone this year, and I feel like there have been 3 or 4 different weeks we've talked about, some play where it's like 1st and goal, and he's throwing the ball into a coverage that is like you just throw that ball away on 1st down. Like, if we want to have that conversation on 3rd and goal from the 9, like, sure, take a chance. But if you've got a couple more cracks at it, he's been a little bit of a risk taker early in the year. I wonder if that's starting to what is starting to lead to maybe being a little more conservative in the red zone. Because you're right, they've scored 2 touchdowns in all their red zone trips. One was on a 3rd and goal, and it was that little pop pass to Blake Corum. And Michigan State had a couple guys there who Corum just hit the edge and kind of guys got a hand on him, but he was too quick and too strong to get brought down. But if that's JT Tuimoloau on the edge instead of whichever Michigan State edge defender it is, well, he's a little bigger, he's a little faster, he's a little stronger, so maybe he gets Corum down. And then you're 0 in the red zone until the absolutely wonderful Sean McDonough, incredible self-awareness with the trouble with the snap part 2. That was my favorite moment of the game by a wide margin. And then Michigan gets set up with an 8-yard drive when Michigan State's spirit is completely broken, and it's like, okay, then they got in the end zone. But they really didn't have an easy touchdown pretty much all day until that last one. That's a concern. They are going to have to get a little out of their comfort zone, I think, with J.J. McCarthy and trust him to do stuff, because what they're doing right now will work the next couple weeks. I could easily see Illinois giving them another, 4 field goal, 2 touchdown kind of day where the Illinois defense is, it's not incredible, but it's decent. And, if you're coming into that Ohio State game, I don't know, I feel like the next 3 weeks we're not going to learn anything really about Ohio State. As far as what it means for the Michigan game. And I don't know, what would you have to see from Michigan in the red zone the next few weeks to go, okay, they've got it fixed? Is there a number, or is it just a J.J. McCarthy is slinging the ball around in the end zone and they're scoring touchdowns? Yeah, no,
J.J. McCarthy slinging the ball around in the end zone and scoring touchdowns in, like, throwing the pass into the end zone. It's something that he doesn't do a lot. And that's, Michigan State's secondary is not good. They were better. They got some reinforcements back this week. They got, so they had some players, but it's still a Michigan State secondary that has not been good this year. And they didn't really attack it at all. Like the longest pass downfield was 36 yards, but it was a pass interference. Other than that, there's a 25-yarder and a 23-yarder. But I want to see them confident enough to throw the ball into the end zone. And just looking at the last 3 games, so that's Indiana, it's Penn State, and Michigan State. For Michigan, they've had 14 dropbacks in the red zone, have completed 7 passes for a total of about 23 yards as I take out the 5-yard sack. So this is not a productive red zone offense throwing the ball or passing it. And there's an interception in there, and that happened in Indiana, which also had 2 touchdowns. So that's right there, a picture of the inconsistency of the red zone offense, and they need to get that better. And yeah, I think I can make more judgments on Michigan's improvement in that area than I can if Ohio State is suddenly running the ball for 250 yards for the next 3 weeks. Like, that doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, and with Michigan's run defense being as good as it is, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think you could see anything from Ohio State the next 3 weeks that you would go into that game, being able to confidently say Ohio State will definitely rush for 180 or 200 yards in this game. They have looked not great against teams that have had not great rush defenses. One thing that was interesting to me, and we have talked a bunch about the fact that you can't really compare these games head to head. So, take this all with a grain of salt. But Ohio State against Michigan State ran for, now I have lost my notes. Here it is. Ohio State ran for 5.2 yards per carry against Michigan State. Michigan ran for 5.3. So, there's a little bit of scheme and it can be a matchup thing to a certain degree. But, that to me was pretty interesting because it was 5.2 and 5.3 with the offenses on the field. And then with the defenses on the field, Ohio State held Michigan State to 0.3 yards per carry, and Michigan held them to 1.6, which when the numbers get that small, those numbers are functionally the same. Because, you are not going to hold, if you're holding a team under 2 yards per carry, I almost don't care what the number is, if it's 0.3 or 1.6. You're completely dominating the game on the ground. So for the numbers to be very similar on both teams, that was interesting to me, because I think of Michigan as having potentially, a better overall game in the trenches than Ohio State does this year. But, at least in this one case, those numbers were very similar. Let's not talk about the Penn State rush offense for each team, because those numbers were not the same. I did not bother looking them up, but I can tell you with great certainty, those numbers are not the same.
Tom, nobody cares about what happened in the past. This is about what happened in the recent past, not the distant past of over a week and a half ago. But just watching Penn State's run offense with the 2 tight ends in there as well, and Ohio State having a couple of issues in there made me think they were going to have more against Michigan. But that Michigan running game against the Penn State defense was amazing, and we didn't see that same effort from Ohio State. And so I think that's one of the things where it's so fresh in your mind, and so you're going to draw comparisons. But of course, these are different offenses. Tom, what did you think about the late game throws down the field? Because this was clearly something Michigan wanted to blow out Michigan State a little bit more than they did. And so, you throw a receiver pass down the field with Ronnie Bell, and then you take another deep shot. They wanted more points, and I think the fact that they didn't, 29 against this defense is not a lot, and they were looking for more and they couldn't get it. Should we take anything from that?
Not well. I guess you can. That they were they were not just trying to get off, get the clock down to 0 and get out of there. So that eliminates some of the they were playing it safe because they knew they had it, and so they weren't trying to score more. That eliminates that. To me, I saw lots of discourse on, classlessness and, winning the right way and all that. Like, whatever, man. You're paying your football coach $95 million. Like, his job is to stop it. He is a defensive coach. You're paying him $95 million. Stop it. If you can't stop it, well, don't give the man $95 million. I don't know what to tell you. But, Michigan very clearly wanted to make a statement and then didn't really make the statement, which is a statement in and of itself that, you had one drive, they went 8 plays, 80 yards on that first touchdown drive. Michigan State did not force a punt except for once in the fourth quarter, and that was one where Ronnie Bell looked like he had a catch, and then it got overturned on replay because it was like, well, the ball was moving in his hand. But you had a Cornelius Johnson fumble on the opening drive. You had the Ronnie Bell almost catch but not quite catch, and then the end of the game. Those were the only 3 times Michigan didn't get points. So, the offense made a statement in that way, like, they really couldn't stop us until we got to the red zone, and then they could stop us pretty easily. But that's fine. Like, let's not talk about that. Then, like I said earlier, this game was a Rorschach test. Like, here's the ink blot. What do you see? Do you see a Michigan offense that only stopped itself by having a fumble and a almost but not quite catch? Or do you see a Michigan offense that had one long drive for a touchdown and then couldn't get in the end zone after that and had to be handed a completely unforced error by Michigan State special teams, which handed it an 8-yard drive at the point which Michigan State's defense had more or less was pretty much demoralized. The game was pretty much over, and then you run and you score again. Like, which one of those would you like to believe it is? Because you could interpret it as either one. And I don't know. Like I said, I came into this game thinking, wow, Michigan really is a bad matchup for Ohio State this year. And then it's like, you look at this and it's like, well, they can't get the ball in the end zone, and they keep getting torched deep by a wide receiver who, where would Keon Coleman be on the Ohio State wide receiver depth chart? 4th? Where is Keon Coleman? Is he? Are we counting Jackson Smith-Njigba? But he's behind Marvin Harrison. He's probably behind Emeka Egbuka. You want to have the, is he similar to Julian Fleming? Like, okay, that's the one dude it was him. He was the one dude all game, 5 catches, 155 yards. And Michigan really had no answer. And the only time they really stopped him going downfield, they had 2 guys just on him. It was a corner and a safety just on him, which, you can do that against the Ohio State offense, but then Ohio State has other wide receivers who are also good, which Michigan State does not really have. So I look at that and I'm like, oh boy, that might be a problem if it's a clear, dry day in Columbus on November 26th.
Yeah, that was not great. And we can transition to the Michigan defense if you like, because I'm just looking at I know time of possession is mostly a worthless stat, but sometimes it is pretty jarring. Michigan State had the ball for 6 minutes and 55 seconds in the second half. Michigan had a field goal drive of 6 minutes and 23 seconds. So like Michigan had the ball more in every single quarter than Michigan State had in the second half. And that's part of that domination that doesn't necessarily necessarily show up in the scoreboard. Like 29-7 is, it's a 3 touchdown win, and it is what it is. And a lot of the field goals make it look less impressive. But when you look at these second half drives of, 4 yards, negative 17 yards, 8 yards, and 49 yards, it was, again, just another dominating performance by Michigan defense. And I'm looking at these drives, just the time of possession on their drives, 1 minute, 8 seconds for Michigan State. That was their last drive of the first half. Then it was 42 seconds, then 1 minute and 28 seconds, then 1 minute and 19 seconds, and then 1 minute and 38 seconds, and then 1 minute and 48 seconds. And that was the Michigan State's offense. Just all they have is Peyton Thorne throwing it up to Keon Coleman. They can't run the ball. There's very little direction. It's just throw it up and pray. And Keon Coleman was answering some of those prayers against the likes of Jamon Green and maybe DJ Turner got in one. I think he got behind the safeties at one point as well, Coleman. But overall, that's the only good thing that we saw from Michigan State. And as we've said in Buckeye Weekly about Ohio State, if you're playing Ohio State and your only hope is to throw it up, like Penn State's only hope is for 50-50 balls, you're not going to win. You don't have enough hopes. You need more than that. Michigan State had nothing else.
No, and that's, that goes to Michigan State just being completely unable to run the ball. And, Michigan was not the only team that bogged down in the red zone. There was a 3rd and 2 where Michigan just completely stonewalled the running back, and then they went forward on 4th and 1 in the red zone and ran just the dumbest, slowest developing run play. That was, Tony, I don't want to say it was a little bit of a misdirection play, but the fact that there were 3 unblocked Michigan defenders right at the point of attack where the ball was going, that to me was an indication that the misdirection did not fool anyone, which is, not what you're looking for if you're Michigan State. But yeah, it was just Michigan State just could never run the ball. Now, Michigan State couldn't run the ball against Ohio State either, so Michigan State might just not be a very good running team this year. But if Michigan is doing what a good run defense would do against a bad run attack, and that, to me, one of the questions that, every time I start thinking, well, maybe Ohio State will win the game this year, I go back to the stat that I write an article about every year, which is the team that runs for more yards per carry in the Ohio State-Michigan game has won the Ohio State-Michigan game every year since 2002 or something like that. It goes back like 20 years. Every year, the team that runs the ball for more yards per carry. So this is not like skewed by, well, if you're winning, you're going to run the ball more. If you're behind, you're going to throw the ball. It's yards per carry. The team that runs the ball in the Ohio State-Michigan game wins the Ohio State-Michigan game every year. And this year, you look at it, and it's like, well, Michigan, Ohio State's run defense is going to be better, but Ohio State's running attack right now is just a disaster. And so it would be very surprising if Ohio State outrushed Michigan on a yards per carry basis this year, unless they're able to use the deep pass to open things up in the run game, and then you can hit some run plays. You do the opposite of the old run to set up the pass, you pass to set up the run. So, maybe that works, but that's not how Ryan Day has really been calling plays. That's certainly not how Ryan Day was calling plays at Penn State. And so you wonder whether he'll go in with that mindset or whether he's going to be willing to throw deep to try and open things up. Because to me, it seems very unlikely that Ohio State's going to be able to run the ball well and consistently against Michigan. I mean, what are the odds that Ohio State runs for 5 yards per carry against Michigan this year? 15%?
Yeah, I would top it out at 20 right now, and that may raise, that may shrink depending on how things look. Because even, like I said, even if they're running the ball well the next few weeks, that doesn't really tell us much. It tells us more if they don't. And then it's like, well, that confirms that Ohio State is not going to be able to run the ball against Michigan. So you're going to have to find some other way to do it. And Ryan Day is adamant that they have to be able to run the ball. And it's like, well, if you can't, maybe you should just continue to throw the ball down the middle of the field to guys like Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka. Looking at in terms of who runs the ball better right now, Michigan leads the Big Ten. This is Big Ten play only. This is what we'll go on. Michigan's leading the Big Ten at 5.56 yards per carry. Ohio State is second at 5.09. That's, if we just look at the last 2 weeks, I think you're going to look at quite a different number. But then you also have to look at the defense. Like Michigan is allowing 2.58 yards per carry in Big Ten play. Ohio State is allowing 3.1. So very similar numbers on both sides. Michigan better than Ohio State in each of those, but both defenses have shown that they're good enough to contain a running game. I think, and I thought we were talking about the Michigan defense, but now we've steered into Michigan versus Ohio State, because I think, Tom, my big takeaway is if Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers can tackle Blake Corum, and if they miss no tackles against Blake Corum, if Blake Corum doesn't break or doesn't make guys miss, if those two guys don't miss any tackles, I give Ohio State more than probably like a 60 or 65% shot of winning that game if they just don't let Blake Corum free.
Frankly, if there are zero missed tackles, if Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers, if they have more than 4 tackles each or something, if Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers combine for 18 tackles and have no missed tackles, I would go so far as to say Ohio State's like 90% chance to win the game. Because how does Blake Corum beat you? Blake Corum beats you by breaking a tackle, spinning right at the first down marker and picking up the first down, dragging you 5 yards to pick up the first down. Like you saw Blake Corum beating Michigan State's defense in every way you could possibly beat him, other than a long run. It's just, if you can get him to the ground, you can beat Michigan, because then you're putting the game in J.J. McCarthy's hands, and I'm not sold on the fact that J.J. McCarthy can beat Ohio State this year. But getting Blake Corum to the ground is pretty hard, which is why Blake Corum's already over 1,000 yards rushing this season. So that is one of those, if you tell me this stat, I will tell you with a great deal of certainty who wins the game. If you tell me that they really don't miss any tackles and they can get Blake Corum to the ground consistently with the first guy there, okay, then I would say very, very likely Ohio State's Michigan's not going to be able to score enough points if Blake Corum, and or Donovan Edwards is not busting off, 180 yards rushing or whatever it is. If they hold both of those guys under 80 yards rushing each, something like that, Ohio State probably wins the game right there. But you saw Ohio State, which has been a pretty good tackling team all season, have trouble getting some guys to the ground on Saturday, and that was more on the outside than in the running game. But I am less confident in Ohio State's tackling than I was before going to Beaver Stadium, which is another reason why I walked out of there going, I don't know how this is going to go.
Tom, let's try to get back to this Michigan defense and leave Ohio State out of the picture a little bit. Again, I was impressed with Rod Moore, the safety, came up with an interception. He's always kind of around the ball. Mike Sainristil is always around. I wonder, I don't know his situation. I wonder if he has a 6th year available that he might like to use, although maybe now's the best time for him to cash in on this 1 year on defense and go see what the NFL thinks of him. But overall, the stopping the run as they do, it's a complete collective effort, and then making poor Peyton Thorne run for his life. They only sacked him twice, but you get different guys every week. Braden McGregor was in there. He had a sack, and it's good to see him out there getting some time as that pass rusher. And they've got guys that they just roll in, and they weren't overly effective. And I thought Peyton Thorne had some time to throw that allowed the deep stuff, but I think they contained him pretty well, and that they weren't. Maybe it's Michigan State not being able to execute. I think they need to get after quarterbacks more moving forward. A guy like CJ Stroud, perhaps. I don't know, maybe Tommy DeVito. I have not watched any Illinois yet, so I don't exactly know just how much they need to get after him. But this is just the Michigan State offense that really had nothing, and that's been the story for most of the season, regardless of opponent. So I have no, even my notes, like, The tempo, I guess tempo hurt Michigan State or Michigan a little bit, which that's most defenses. And we saw Ohio State struggle with Penn State's tempo. Then Penn State went most of the game. So that's to be expected. Overall, just it was one of those games where Michigan had pretty much just control of everything that Michigan State wanted to do, other than the one thing. And so Michigan State just kept trying to do that, and that only takes you so far.
Right. Well, that only gets you so far, especially if it's just one wide receiver. If you've got, it's the Ricky White game part 2, except Michigan State lost this one because Michigan is better than they were 2 years ago. But yeah, it was the one thing, and it kept working. And you're right, I had tempo in my notes as well. That seemed like that kept Michigan a little off balance, and that's something that Ohio State probably needs to think about running more. They have won a ton of tempo this year. That's something you probably, if you're Ryan Day, you probably need to think about working that in for the Michigan game. And it's not like they haven't run tempo in the past. They have. They just haven't run it a lot this year. The other thing that was interesting to me was, this is something we've talked about a bunch this year, but man, Michigan's pass rush in obvious passing situations is just murder on the opposing quarterback and just kills the opposing defensive line. If you get yourself in a 3rd and 8, you have got to get the ball out fast. Like, that is not when you're going to be able to take your shots downfield. You're going to have to, non-obvious passing situations, that's when you're going to have to, take your shots downfield. Because if it's 3rd and 9, they are coming, and you are not going to have a lot of time to get it out. Now, if everything is an obvious passing situation because Ohio State can't run the ball, well, that complicates things quite a bit for them, doesn't it? So there's a lot of moving pieces in place here in trying to sort this game out. Because I watch this game every week with the Ohio State game in mind, obviously, because that's literally the point of this show. But it strikes me that, how fans will watch their team and they'll nitpick their team, and it's like, well, Alabama's perfect. I don't know why the Ohio State can't be more like Alabama, or, Georgia's perfect. Why can't Michigan be more like Georgia? Well, if you watch every snap of every game, we're nitpicking Ohio State and Michigan both and going, well, here's all the different places that they have, obvious and concerning failure points heading into this game. So, I think, Tennessee has issues as well. Georgia has issues as well. Alabama has issues as well. Clemson has issues as well. I mean, you can go down the list. I don't think there is like the one just murder machine team this year, but Michigan has some concerning issues. Ohio State has some concerning issues going into this game. I could see Michigan getting torched like in a shocking way by the Ohio State passing offense. I could also see Ohio State, bogging down like they did without being able to run the ball in the first half against Penn State, and the game playing out kind of like it did last year, just depending on how well Michigan can run the ball. And again, how is that going to go? Well, we'll see, because it seems like a better Ohio State defense, but it's a better Michigan running offense.
You mentioned the obvious passing situations. That's something I kept track of a few weeks ago and tallied all of the Michigan sacks from the defensive line and non-obvious passing situations, of which they had 2, and they still only have 2. But Tom, I'll let you be the arbiter here, and because they had 2 sacks in this game, both by the defensive line. The first one I consider an obvious passing situation, 2nd and 15. Mm-hmm. What say you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So again, then the next one, the score is 29-7. It's the 4th quarter. It is 2nd and 10. Braden McGregor with a sack. Like, this is an obvious passing situation.
Yeah,
yes. So the defensive line at Michigan still only has 2 sacks in non-obvious passing situations this season. Ohio State throws the ball in non-obvious pass situations. They will throw it on 1st and 10 in the first quarter. They'll throw it on, 2nd and 5. Like, that ability to do that, and Michigan's lack of sacks at this season so far in this, however many games we played, 7 or 8 games now, I realize sacks aren't the end-all be-all. Pressures are important as well. Hurries are important. But we have the one measurement of sacks to bring the quarterback down. And if the Michigan defensive line doesn't know that a pass is coming, they are not nearly as effective at getting to the quarterback, which tells me that Ohio State maybe has a better chance than most. Of course, they have a better chance than most because they have better talent than most. But makes me think that they will be able to throw the ball against Michigan. However, Tom, if everything's an obvious passing situation, as you said, then a first down pass is an obvious passing situation. Maybe they treat everything as an obvious pass situation, and then they sack CJ Stroud 13 times.
And that's the thing. Like, you have to be able to have some kind of a balance. If you literally can't run the ball at all, if you're running for 13 carries for 12 yards or something like that in the first half, then everything is an obvious pass situation. Now, here's a caveat on here's a caveat on your caveat there, which is, how is Michigan able to stop the run game? Is Michigan able to stop the run game with their front four, or does Michigan need to bring run blitzes? Because that's going to change that's going to change my assessment of things as well. If Michigan can stop the Ohio State run game with 4 defensive linemen, that is going to be a bad day for Ohio State. If Michigan can't stop the Ohio State run game with 4 defensive linemen, or control the Ohio State run game to 4 something yards a carry with 4 defensive linemen, well, that might be a bad day for Michigan. Because then you need to allocate more resources to the run game, plus Ohio State staying on schedule. That could be a bad time for Michigan. So that might be, I feel like we're going to, in the next 3 weeks, spend so much time talking about you tell me this one thing, and I will tell you what I think is going to happen in the Ohio State-Michigan game. That's another one. Can Michigan's defensive line, which has been very good this year and contained the run very, very well and gotten pressure on the quarterback in obvious passing situations, can Michigan do that with just their defensive front four, or are they going to have to dedicate more resources? Because if you have to dedicate more resources to stop the Ohio State run game, then, well, that's going to open up more stuff downfield. And again, Ohio State has multiple receivers better than Keon Coleman, so that might not go well.
I could see a situation where it becomes a little bit like the Rose Bowl, where Ohio State essentially abandons the run because the passing game is much more effective, and the run isn't going all that great. And so it's like, we just need to win. Balance, schmalance. Let's just get whatever our best plays are. Let's go and do it. Because ultimately, with everything on the line, you would think in that game, I don't assume Ohio State will be upset at any point from now until then. Michigan has the Illinois game that a lot of people are going to try to blow up and make it become a concern. And if Michigan is playing like this on offense and they can't score touchdowns, it might be a concern in that game. So, looking forward to that one. Tom, anything, any notes that you wanted to touch on?
First of all, I don't think Illinois is going to challenge Michigan. I think Illinois is going to be a problem. Illinois is going to have a lot of the same problems that Michigan State had, where I think Illinois is going to be able to run the ball better than Michigan State did, because they've got a better running attack and probably a better running back. But I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball consistently. And I have also not watched a lot of Illinois football because I care about my mental health, but I do get the sense that Tommy DeVito is probably not going to single-handedly beat you. Like, Tommy DeVito is probably not as good a quarterback as CJ Stroud is, or, even JJ McCarthy is. So that feels like Michigan is going to have a game where it's going to be close-ish in the second half against Illinois, and everyone will come out of that going, "Oh, is Michigan in trouble?" And then, they'll win 27-13. It'll be like the Iowa game again, and it won't mean anything for the Ohio State game. As long as they win that game, it doesn't really matter. I would be very surprised if this was not 11-0 versus 11-0 at this point. I think you're down to 15% chance, 10% chance of one of these teams losing between now and then. The only other note I had specific to the game is JJ McCarthy sometimes will slide feet first. There was one where he had a long run down the middle where he dove head first, and it was like, buddy, you are like 15 yards past the marker. You do not need to get that extra yard. Feet first, do not get yourself killed, because if JJ McCarthy gets hurt, boy, that would not be a good thing. Cade McNamara, we saw Cade McNamara get them to the college football playoff last year, but I think losing JJ McCarthy in the run game would be a devastating blow to Michigan, and it's not like your passing offense gets better if it's Cade McNamara, so... feet first, JJ McCarthy. That is a little wellness tip from me to you.
I think that Illinois game, and I'm just going to take the average of Michigan's Big Ten games so far, because I feel like that's what it's going to be. Michigan is scoring an average of 32 points per game in conference play. They are giving up an average of 15. So that feels like 32-15, something like 31-14, 31-17. Although 31 seems like it might be a lot for that game, that feels like a 27-13, something like that. Ugly. And that is one where you just get out of town. And I realize that's in Michigan, but just get out of town. Like, win it any way you can. Be safe. Be as healthy as possible. Run that clock. Like, that over under on that game is probably like 3 hours and 11 minutes, as long as it doesn't go 8 overtimes, because Brett Bielema is going to want to run the clock. Michigan is going to want to run the clock. And that should be a pretty short game. Shouldn't have to extend the DVR for that one, like I forgot to for Ohio State Penn State this week.
Whoops. Yeah, and that one. Yeah, I don't expect Michigan to get. I don't expect that to be a pretty win, but I also don't expect it to be a particularly close game, or a particularly last minute kind of game. This just feels like this is setting up for whoever wins the Ohio State-Michigan game is going to go to the Big Ten championship game. And, especially if it's Michigan, you're playing Illinois again for the second time in 2 weeks. It just feels like Illinois is sort of built to drag you down into a gross, low-scoring game where it's like the 2019 Big Ten championship game, Ohio State and Wisconsin. And Ohio State had just played Penn State and at Michigan in a row, and then has to play Wisconsin a third week in a row, and then has a really sluggish first half against Wisconsin. I think was trailing at the half of that game, and ended up winning by a couple touchdowns, I think. But that was enough for Ohio State to get jumped by LSU in the college football playoff rankings, and then Ohio State had to play Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl, and LSU got the first round bye against Oklahoma. So that that ended up being a big decisive thing. I could see that happening, even if Ohio State is jockeying or Michigan is jockeying for the number one overall spot in the college football playoff rankings. I could see, a Big Ten championship game against Illinois for either of them being like Illinois, that's only Illinois, you only beat them by 10 points. That's not very good. You got to give the number one spot to fill in the blank SEC team. And, and then you've got to play a better opponent in the first round. We have seen it before. It just sort of feels like it's shaping up for us to see it again this year.
Tom, my bold prediction, this will not be the last 29-7 score for Michigan in the next 3 weeks. So it's an ugly score. There's going to be some ugly games.
Yeah, even if it's not exactly 29-7, like spiritually, it's going to be 29-7. It's going to be something right in that range, and a lot of field goals, and a really unpleasant win for Michigan fans. But I mean, after the decade or so that they have had, ugly wins are still better than what they have had a number of times in the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke and even some of the Jim Harbaugh era. So, ugly wins are wins too.
They still count, especially on the road. Never turn down a road win in the Big Ten, no matter how ugly. Tom, anything else? Are we done? Have we completed all of our thoughts on this Michigan State game? Well,
before we started recording, you said 26 minutes, and we are now at double 26 minutes, so I think we're done.
Well said, Tom, and well said throughout the entire show. So that will do it. I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. We'd love to see you there. Hit us up on the message board. You can also find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we drop all of our podcasts there. Go live from the game, before the game, after the game. Random Friday live shows from wherever we are on the road. This week we'll be somewhere near Chicago, so look forward to that on Friday. And I look forward to that. You should as well. So that will do it for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.